CrowdSourcery is part of the Eastern Promise family, in proud association with Mills and Reeve, achieving more together. Welcome to the Eastern Promise podcast and to our regular feature where you share the things you love most about the East of England. As we belatedly pop a cork. Sorry. To celebrate the arrival of 2025 and your hopes and dreams for the year ahead. Because, let's face it, from a global perspective, the year isn't off to the strongest of starts, and if it doesn't buck up pronto, 2025 is going to be kept in, at break, doing lines.
I must not disappoint the East of England. I must not disappoint the East of England. I must not disappoint the East of England. I must not disappoint the East of England.
But here in the East, opportunity and potential are a brewing, and it's a heady, exciting, transformational elixir. So let's look at the year ahead, with spells that fare ye well. Yes, it's...
CrowdSourcery.
First up, we have Jack Weaver, Chief Operating Officer at Norfolk Chambers of Commerce. And a big hello to everyone at the big debate last week, where I was delighted to be on a panel looking at the perception of place and Norfolk's brand. Back to Jack! Says he, how long have you got? There's a lot I want from 2025. For the business community, I want the sentiment that was echoed in a recent policy-related call with the British Chambers of Commerce. A little more hope, please! October's budget made a lot of our members really nervous, and I'd like to see some green shoots of positivity or some olive branches from the government. Well, if it's positivity you want, Jack, keep your ears glued to the Eastern Promise podcast, where every week we ladle into your ear canals the finest, most hopeful stories from the East of England. Yes, we're banging your eardrum for the region. Thank you. Thank you. But the Weaver wish list goes on. For Norfolk Chambers of Commerce, I hope to see even more fascinating businesses in our business hub in Norwich, joining the marketers, recruiters, content creators, accountants, and so on. Prize for the most niche business booking of 2025, perhaps. Shameless plug alert. You know, it is, frankly, a magnificent facility, the Business Hub, perching like a proud eagle atop Norwich's Prince of Wales Road. And next for Jack Weaver, Wheeled Warrior, personally, he says, I want to spend more time on the motorbike in 2025, exploring Norfolk and the rest of the region. Dare I even dream of a European adventure next year? Doubtful. Not with that attitude, man. Jack, my friend, optimism begins at home.
Bonjour.
Even if it's just a quick nip to the Carrefour at Boulogne for a baguette and a 6-pack of Orangina.
Oh mon Dieu.
That still counts. Thank you, Jack. And now to another hashtag friend of the show. Adam Peed, that's introverted sales guy and business development strategist. Although the first time I read that, I thought it said the inverted sales guy, so head held high, feet held higher. Says Adam, I would love to see the region's startups and scale-ups achieving the funding and runways they need for innovation. Do you know, me too, Adam. Government does have its place, but I really think we mustn't wait for Rachel Reeves to ride over the hill with the 7th Monetary Policy Hussars. If nothing else, it's expecting external forces to ride to our rescue and making other people responsible for our situation. Adam continues. More blood donations. Yes, this is something both Adam and another friend of the show, Tarquin Bennett Coles of Compass Carter Osborne, have advocated for a long time, putting their veins where their verbal is. And Adam concludes, more golf courses inviting me to play around. Look, Royal West Norfolk, what are you waiting for? Adam is an asset to any fairway. Having prayed him in aid just a moment ago, here he is in person. Well, not quite in person. Tarquin Bennett Coles, Director of Life Sciences Practice at Compass Carter Osborne, Advisor for the Little Bean Journey, Pro Bono Mentor, and Careers Advisor for the Homerton Changemakers and the Cambridge Judge Business School. Tarquin, I will never tire of reading that out. Nor this, from Tarquin himself. More collaboration and celebrations of our similarities, more tolerance, and more Eastern Promise podcasts. Agreed, and agreed. The hat trick is yours, Tarquin. Take the match ball home. And on that last point, I hope and intend to deliver. That said, Eastern Promise only succeeds thanks to your support. We're very proud of our association with Mills and Reeve. If you want to see what we do grow and evolve and to be part of that, do consider supporting us. And contact me on podcast@easternpromise.org.uk to discuss how we can work together. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you the thoughts of Ros Fairburn, Chief Growth Officer at Triple Chasm. Thanks, Mike. Exciting to see what 2025 will bring us. I love how you're all about collaboration, so more of that, and how we support each other would be fantastic. Ros, your wish is my command. On the 13th of March, in fact, Eastern Promise will be bringing you the tale of Cambridge Materials Science Innovation Dynamo, Zampler, and Norwich Titan of Food and Gut Health Research, the Quadram Institute. And I'm going to be looking to bring more of the East of England's most innovative, inspiring and energetic folks together on stage, screen and MP3 player. Lastly, in this look ahead, we have our friend and yours, hypnotic marketing mage, Laura Quelch. Now, I assume the hypnotic marketing bit is Laura employing metaphor. But I mean, if not, you're going to want to check that out, right? I mean, it'd be like...
You will listen to the next episode of the Eastern Promise podcast.
But I digress. Laura says... Mike, I'm deaf on a mission to explore more of beautiful Norfolk. It's my birthday soon, so I'm looking forward to a fun day out. Well, Laura, I hope you have a fantastic birthday, and there are certainly no shortage of things to see and do in Norfolk and across the whole east of England. Whatever you plan to get up to, it's almost certainly a lot closer than you think. Thank you for all your contributions. Sorry, what's that? Oh, my hopes and dreams. Well, thank you for asking. I want to see many more businesses, academics, researchers, charities, schools, colleges, all across Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex engage with their colleagues in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and outside of the region too. You may meet as the result of a happy accident, but collaboration doesn't automatically follow. It requires work, it requires effort, and that's something we all need to put into the pot. Here endeth the lesson. But here doesn't endeth this edition of CrowdSourcery, as now I shall attempt to answer your questions. welcome to this Q&A extravaganza with me, Mike Rigby, executive producer of the Eastern Promise podcast, CEO of the Eastern Promise Community Interest Company, and human loudhailer. Or as the Americans put it, human bullhorn. Now, thank you to everyone who submitted questions, which I shall proceed to answer. And rest assured, I'm coming to you not live, which possibly means coming to you undead from Eastern Promise headquarters. You've been so generous in sending me your fantastic questions. I am truly thankful. Despite what I tell the mirror and my mother, Eastern Promise is not about me. It's about you. Without you, your stories of success and progress, potential, opportunity, your willingness to engage, Eastern Promise would be nothing at all. So, your questions fall into two broad categories: sensible and deeply silly. And like the pro I am, I've answered them all. So let's start with my dear friends and supporters at Mills & Reeve, sponsors of Eastern Promise, without whose help none of this would happen. And it's Gemma Hoskins, Senior Business Development Advisor at Mills & Reeve, who asks, "What's your secret to being so full of enthusiasm and energy, Mike?" Second question, can you bottle it up for the rest of us? Oh, easy peasy, Gemma. Coffee! The enthusiasm is the easy bit because you guys do the hard work for me. I'll now consider the bottling idea. I do need a good line of merch. Now we welcome back Michelle Chambers of Cannon Clark Architects and the East of England Sustainable Building Network, longtime friend of the show, who has a 2-for-1 offer. At least I think that's what she meant by bog off. Michelle asks, who's the funniest person you've interviewed? Oh, it's a crowded field, Michelle. But the standouts have to be, in no particular order, the wonderful Jane Hutchins, with whom I toured the Cambridge Science Park, and we laughed and joked and giggled all the way round. We did also produce some serious audio, in case you're wondering. Oxford Innovation's Kelly Boosie, who showed me around the epicentre in Haverhill very early on in the Eastern Promise timeline. Kelly is like your cooler, funnier big sister. Then we have Norfolk Chamber of Commerce's very own Jack Weaver, no stranger he to the witty zinger. And likewise, Al Kingsley MBE of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Business Board, both of whom share my rather dry sense of humour. That's literally share my dry sense of humour, by the way. Clearly, I'm not currently using it. It's like lift share, but for sarcasm. Snark share. There's also Chris Sargison of Hethel Innovation. But that was less because we were hilarious and more because I was interviewing him at the Unthank Arms in Norwich. He was buying, and frankly, I'm a cheap date. Michelle's next question. Of your guests, whose story resonated with you the most on a personal level? So, I'd say there are really two types of resonance. One is with the story and the other is with the person. Story-wise, it definitely has to be the Norwich City Council Civic UEA Passover Seder. It's a beautiful story of forgiveness and atonement that had me on the verge of blubbing down the microphone. Ian Crichton of Alia Impact achieved something quite similar with these amazing tales of the people whom Alia helps to do good in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. When I felt that resonance with a guest on the podcast, it's with people who, when faced with a challenge, whether personal or professional, immediately want to explore how it can be overcome, not explain to you why it can't. It's people who can't help but fizz with ideas and then act upon them. And it's often those people with whom I feel that personal connection as interviewer to guest. Now, I'm not saying when I fizz with ideas, they're particularly good ones, but I do try my best. Now, a very Cambridge approach here from Ros Fairburn, Chief Growth Officer at Triple Chasm, who's utilised the latest AI to generate some doozies for me to answer. What inspired you to start a podcast about our region? Quite simply, I love working in audio. I have for many years. The region gave me greater possibilities too than just one county, and the positivity angle also suited me and my mental well-being very, very well indeed. Roz writes, or the AI writes, can you share a hidden gem in our area that most people might not know about? That's a big question. I'd like to think that every episode uncovers a hidden gem for some, and yet the same gem can easily have occupied the subject's every waking moment for years. But if you must press me for an answer, I'd say these. The work being done by Ediform to push through the boundaries of material science through the 3D printing of food at the UEA. Thetford and Kings Lynn, 2 Norfolk towns with rich historic and cultural assets that are being utilised to drive forward regeneration. They really do have a bright future ahead of them because they've got good bones. We just need to sweat those assets. He says we, like it's me. It's not me, but I think that's what needs to happen, for what it's worth. Now, networking events, we have many in our region, as you all know. But I will move heaven and earth to attend Connexon Life Science networking events. They really do make you feel so welcome, and it's so hard when you first go to a networking event. You don't know many people, you do feel like a bit of a wallflower, and you end up making sort of pained conversation with strangers. But Connexon is an absolutely different kettle of fish. You feel so much embraced by the community. Looking at a more rural aspect, the 3 Tons Community Pub in Gilden Morden near Royston, saved from closure by local residents with help from Plunkett UK and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. Then we have the work being done by environmental charity Groundwork East, one example of which being their help for Watford's residents to rediscover the River Colne. And lastly, the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge. The centre has a playable version of every games console ever. It's a quirky venue in the finest traditions of the east of England. From the outside, it looks like, an electrical wholesaler's. Inside, such rich computing history. Including computers from London Underground, ICI, really interesting, fascinating stories. It's a beautiful resource. Another question from AI Roz. What's been your favourite episode or interview so far, and why? Roz, that's a real daddy or chips question. In terms of my sheer levels of enjoyment in what I'm doing in the moment, it has to be Jane Hutchins. If it's about testing my prowess in the editing suite, it was the recent Tall Tales episode of CrowdSourcery.
CrowdSourcery.
Yes, I might have known you'd do that. With all the special effects and spooky music, or when, with the author's blessing, I turned a short story by guest and Norfolk sci-fi writer Garrick Fincham into a dramatised audiobook, which you can download for free from the Eastern Promise podcast feed. If it's in terms of ending an interview in stunned awe of my subjects, then it has to be Harriet Fear, MBE, Tristan Fisher, and Andy Neely, OBE. If you think you should be on that list, well, get in touch. podcast@easternpromise.org.uk. How do you decide which topic or guest to feature on your podcast? Great question, AI Roz. I judge it on a balance between person, place, potential, and positivity. You have to know your audience. That's you. You trust your gut, and most of all, I try to stay true to the ethos of Eastern Promise. Plus, there is a very large dollop of my curiosity thrown into the mix. What are some of the most surprising things you've learned about our region through your podcast? I could go on at length about how ready and willing Cambridge is to engage, but it needs the rest of us to step up too. So listen out for the interview with Stefan Gurney and Joe Faulkner of the Norwich Business Improvement District. Stefan drops an amazing fact about the City of Stories that absolutely blew my mind. Can you tell us about a memorable story or experience from one of your podcast episodes? As it happens, I can. Do you know, going back to the Centre for Computing History, I decided that it would be a nice idea to interview Susan Gowling of Sustainable Tech for Good at the Centre for Computing History's small cafe area. What I didn't know until I was there doing the recording that there was an arcade machine in the cafe, and every 5 minutes that arcade machine let out a blood-curdling scream. I tried to fix that in the edit. I failed. What do you see, asks AI Roz, for the future of our region? Do you know, it's hard, Roz, for the wish not to be father to the thought. I'd like to see a return to regional development agencies in some form, but I'm under no illusions that is not currently on the cards. What are some must-visit places or events that you would recommend to both locals and visitors? Well, excluding those I've already mentioned, all of which are indeed worth a visit, events-wise. It has to be Cambridge Tech Week, the Royal Norfolk Show, and Cambridge Wide Open Week, the Norfolk and Norwich Festival, and the Norwich Science Festival. In terms of locations you might want to visit, the National Trust has a buttload. It's actually measured by the load of the butt of fantastic houses and gardens for you and your family to explore this half-term and beyond. There's also Cambridge Science Centre, which is wonderful. Please go and visit it. It is such a delightful place of fun and learning. Whenever I'm there, it's just so wonderful to be in that place and just fiddle with stuff, have a bit of a play and learn while you're at it. How do you engage with your audience and incorporate their feedback into your podcast? Do you know, so far, it's been mainly looking at the numbers for each episode and noting what's landed best. Engagement-wise, it's through LinkedIn posts, DMs and direct contact. I am, though, intending to prepare a proper survey over the half-term break. But if you want to comment and if you want to give me some feedback, I'm really keen to listen. Do drop me a line at podcast@easternpromise.org.uk. What advice would you give to someone looking to explore and appreciate our region more deeply? First, listen to the podcast. You'll find out so much more about our region from the people who really know. Second, get out there and explore. Let public transport do the heavy lifting where you can. Greater Anglia trains are fantastic and we are rightly very proud of them. And lastly, don't be afraid to ask for recommendations. Eastern Promise can help. Thank you, Roz. Those were all wonderful questions, and I hope I've done them justice. We mentioned a moment ago the Royal Norfolk Show, and here we have the main man, Mark Nicholas, MBE, DL. That means he's a Deputy Lieutenant. It doesn't mean he's an envelope. Managing Director at the Royal Norfolk Agricultural Association, who writes, Mike, tell me, after all your encounters, what do you think is the biggest impediment to getting things done? Mark, thank you so much for your question, which is a biggie. So, without contravening my no-moan policy, there are various impediments that I would like to flag up, and yet, not one of them is money. Do you know, I hope Eastern Promise stands as a testament to what you can achieve with relatively little in terms of resource. I'm a big believer, though, in strengths-based development, looking at improving the things we're getting right, not fulminating over what's going wrong. You focus on the weakness in a place or a person or a system, the strengths will wither and atrophy. Improve your strengths and everything else is raised up with them. Judging by the resounding success of the Norfolk Farming Conference, Mark, you know this. Another case in point, Cambridge. It hasn't been the recipient of so much government attention, including the document The Case for Cambridge, the formation of the Cambridge Delivery Group, because the life science ecosystem is on its arse, but precisely because, it's so strong. When I think about this, Mark, I often think about Texas. It's a long way from Washington, D.C., New York and Los Angeles. It's big. It's the second largest US state, after Alaska. It has a coastline. And, according to The Texanist, Texans are a legendarily hardy people, but Texans are recognized far and wide for an assortment of other Texas-y traits too. A mesquite stump black stubbornness. And that trademark friendliness, of course. Remember, friendship is our state motto. And resilience, a bootstrapping resilience. Did any of that ring a bell? The article goes on to cite a local cliche. If you want something to happen, tell a Texan it can't be done. Now, I don't think Norfolk can swap "hold you hard" for "get her done" overnight, but I would like to see more swagger in Norfolk, more confidence. I've heard folks in Cambridge speak with greater passion about Norfolk and the Norwich science ecosystem than I often hear in Norfolk itself. Mark, I hope that answers your question. Yes, there are impediments to getting things done, but I know, I've met so many of you on my travels. We have what we need to change that, to overcome the impediments, to stop thinking about challenges, start thinking about opportunities, not worrying over much about what we can't do. What can we do? As the saying goes, don't tell me what we can't do. Tell me what we can do. Or, to put it another way, don't be a don't be a do be. Now, on to Doug Field, OBE, CEO, Chair and Non-Executive Director, who asks me, Mike, what do you think the region should do to get noticed on the global stage? And what's stopping us from doing it? Doug, thank you. That is a marvellous question. It would be, admittedly, slightly self-serving of me to argue that the region should support Eastern Promise so we can take care of it. However, I think fundamentally it's about creating the right narrative. At whatever level we're talking about, we have to tell a story that's unified, open and inclusive, in the sense that anyone can make themselves a part of that story, which keeps moving on into new chapters, new twists and turns, and most importantly, new triumphs. Have we got an agreed narrative about what the East of England, what Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough are, what Essex is between all our places and people? Is it hopeful and is it uplifting? Importantly, is it not based on the redress of grievances or asks? Now, back to Adam Peed, the introverted sales guy, not as I originally read it, the inverted sales guy. I'm sure his sales are not inverted and neither is he. Mike, there are so many positives in the region. However, I also have quite a few frustrations. Is this the same for you? Do you know, Adam, I can answer the question, is this the same for you, quite simply. Oh my God, yes. Yes, it is. I've been on occasions where I've wanted to weep. However, there are so many more positives, so many more people who are open, who want to push the East of England to achieve its maximum potential, and I'm standing foursquare with those people. They know who they are, they know I know who they are, and if you're listening to this, it's probably you. So, let's focus on what we can achieve together. Let's work out what the challenges are, and then how we can overcome them. Tarquin Bennett Coles. And I'm going to read this again because I love reading it. Tarquin Bennett Coles, Director of Life Science Practice at Compass Carter Osborne, Advisor for Little Bean Journey, Pro Bono Mentor, and Careers Advisor for the Homerton Changemakers and the Cambridge Judge Business School. Yeah. What legacy or milestones would you, with the Eastern Promise podcast, like to leave behind by episode 200? Keep the jokes coming. Well, I think that last point you may have divided the audience there, Tarquin, but that is a great question. What would I like to leave behind by episode 200? The John Innes Centre. I really want to visit the John Innes Centre. That's been like the missing link in my schedules for many years, and I'm really hoping that I'm going to crack that really soon. I'm really keen to share with the audience around the world just what a fantastic asset the John Innes Centre is to Norwich, to the East of England and to the UK as a whole. There's nothing about the story of the John Innes Centre that isn't engaging, that isn't exciting and that isn't hopeful, which is right up Eastern Promises Street. I want to do at least one live-streamed podcast. I think that would be rather fun. I don't know if it'll be any good, but I want to give it a try. I also think it would be really good fun to interview James Partner and Faye Holland, the team behind the Cambridge Tech podcast, where they basically prop me up and make me sound good. I would love to bring the story of the Camtech podcast to the wider East of England so they can hear the story, enjoy the story, and find out more about how they can engage with the Camtech podcast. That would be absolutely wonderful. I think that would be a lot of fun. And we can even bring in people like Mark Davison, who's got the Big Experiment podcast. That would also be quite a nice thing to do. And maybe we can coax Tim Robinson from Tech East to get involved as well. I'm just spitballing here on an open microphone. Probably not the best idea, but there it is. Ultimately, Tarquin, what Eastern Promise is all about is not journalism. I'm not a journalist. I don't have any journalistic training. I don't want to be a journalist. I don't want Eastern Promise to be journalism. What I want it to be is a resource, a promotional resource, so that if you want to find out about something in the East of England, you go to the Eastern Promise podcast and you find an episode that tells you all you need to know. What would be absolutely wonderful is if people would share the links to the podcast as a means to find out about all the wonderful places in the East of England. I've no idea if that's happening. Lots of people tell me they listen. I feel very humbled by that. I almost don't believe them. Mainly, Tarquin, I just like to get to episode 200, and I'd like some kind of hoopla. I think that would be very nice. A bit of hoopla, mainly so I can express my appreciation to you, the listener. Oh, Dr. Tammy Dugan, Life Sciences and Healthcare Partnerships Lead at the University of Cambridge, super connector, leader, and all-round wonderful, wonderful person. She says, I have my eyes focused on where's my favourite coffee shop, always a necessity. Still laughing about the Christmas cracker jokes. You could be onto something there. Well, Tammy, I do love a good cup of coffee. It depends where I am in the region. If I'm in Norwich, it's the Bread Sauce Cafe at the Cathedral, Wright's, the Feed Cafe in Waterloo Park, and Out of the Blue on the corner of Waterloo Road and Magdalen Road. Cambridge, I got to know Fitzbilly's during last year's Cambridge Tech Week, plus Parker's Tavern in the library with a good cup of coffee and good company. Hot Numbers, which has been oft recommended here, is still on my to-do list, and I do love the cafe at the Bradfield Centre. Ipswich, The Hold, pure and simple, great venue, I love it. Bury St Edmunds, well, Horringer really. Ickworth House, especially if I'm the only one in the Porter's Lodge Cafe, or on the terrace in the summer. Elsewhere, it's the Lime Kiln Cafe at Thetford Garden Centre, Coffee Smiths and the Peter Beale's Rosarium in Attleborough, Welt Coppers on the North Norfolk coast, and I have a sneaky love for the Marina Theatre Tea Room in Lowestoft. Elsewhere, Huntingdon, Peterborough, Ely. These are places I've never been long enough to get around the town and find a new favourite. But hopefully that will come soon enough. Now, we have Ben Little, Associate Pro-Vice-Chancellor Civic at the University of East Anglia. But before we get to that, I just want to say this. I am privileged to know a lot of very sensible, highly intelligent and intensely practical, grounded people all over the east of England. Ben's one of them. So I really do feel the need to declare right here, right now, that Ben's question brings up issues and questions that are, at their heart, deeply silly. I'm comfortable with that, I can engage with that, but if taking a turn to the absurd is triggering for you, please look after yourselves and step away, please. Are they gone? Okay, right, Ben, here we go. Your question. If the UEA is Avengers HQ, where in Norfolk would you make the Batcave? Steve Bjork, CGI and animation professional at Eggbox Studios, who always has an eye to good real estate, says Jernitz Bar in Norwich is vacant. Now, before we get the atomic batteries to power and the turbines to speed, I hope you get that reference, Ben Little says Jernitz is actually more like the Joker's secret lair than the Batcave. Two massively important heritage projects for Norwich, which could totes double as locations for Norfolk Screen to get their teeth into. The Batcave needs space for the Batmobile. Can't see that bursting out of either. Chris Blinko, Associate Director at Opporgy Net Zero, makes this offering. How about the Hidden Street as a Batcave, Ben? Yes, says the returning Adam Pede. You could tap, he says, into the old tunnels under the castle and use the Castle Quarter car park as an exit. Holy Norfolk Screen, Batman! I can totally see the co-founder of Norfolk Screen, Craig Higgins, as the Boy Wonder. I bet he has a bright yellow cape and green underpants on hand. And Craig, I think Chris may be demonstrating his potential as a location scout as he is undeterred and offers this. How about the Coney Hall cave then, complete with its tragic history and reasonable access to the B1108? Coming back on this, Adam Pede adds, tragic history and reasonable access to the 1108? Pure partridge. So, if you trade the lions for bats, I think we all agree that Coney Hall is, in fact, the East of England's answer to the Bat Cave. We got there, people. Dramatic hero fanfare, please! Ben, 3 things. 1, you've made me say totes, and for that, I will obviously have to mete out some form of punishment. 2, you have caused the majority of this Q&A to be consumed by the question of where in the east of England would you build the Batcave? Now, I've been a Marvel reader and fan since the early 90s, so this is right up my street, hidden or otherwise, and if you're still with me here, you were warned. And 3, what you've done is made me consider what other locations in the east of England could double as sci-fi, fantasy and comic book counterparts. So, let's start out nice and easy. Doubling as the X-Mansion from the Uncanny X-Men, Homerton College, one for you, Tarquin. John Carter, Warlord of Mars, Orford Ness. You could use one of the pagodas there as Superman's Fortress of Solitude. And not to stretch the metaphors too far, but how about Norwich as Asgard, only accessible via a secret rainbow bridge we mortals call the A11. While we're riffing on popular culture, I am still trying to get a podcast going called Revolting Pedants, and I've recorded the first episode with Jack Weaver, James Lee Burgess, Adam Pede and Steve Bjork. That episode still awaits my editing prowess, or otherwise, but it will rise again. Ben, it sounds like you would enjoy being part of it. Jack Weaver already has a t-shirt-worthy catchphrase in, "That sounds like a cheese dream." And James Lee Burgess has examined in great detail why David Lynch's take on Dune shows the need to include more pugs in sci-fi. And on that note, I have a complaint from Jack Weaver who says, if I don't get Revolting Pedants out there soon, listening to it will be like watching an old episode of Tomorrow's World, where we get a fascinating insight into the futuristic lives to be led in 2002. Jack, I hate to disagree. Obstinacy is for today. Pedantry is eternal. I'll get there, I will get there, I promise. And if sitting round picking holes in popular culture with added jokes and a pseudo-Soviet revolutionary theme sounds like your thing, get in touch. I'll edit episode 1 and maybe even get you on board for episode 2. I have selected the theme music for Revolting Pedants, which I shall now play for your listening pleasure. That's enough of that. And so, thank you for your questions. I hope they were illuminating, interesting, and possibly even humorous answers. We'll be back next week with a more sedate and normal version of the Eastern Promise podcast. This time, episode 122, which will feature Innovate Cambridge, with Catherine Chapman, Michael Anstey, and Anna Lucia Buckman giving us a tour of the Glass House right next door to the Botanic Gardens in Cambridge. Innovate Cambridge has really brought the city together. It's doing so much good, and I really want Eastern Promise to give it every support possible. So please do tune in for that. Enjoy your half-term holidays, if you can, and we'll see you again in just 7 short days' time. Until then, bye for now. CrowdSourcery is part of the Eastern Promise family and a Prior's Croft production. in proud association with Mills and Reeve. Achieving more together.